INSiiGHTS Sports Talk.
1, 2, talk and talk.
INSiiGHTS Sports Talk. Traveling the country for the biggest stories in collegiate sports. Bringing you the news that will impact every college athlete in America. From the Ivy League to the SWAC, Big Sky to the Big Ten, Notre Dame to Grambling U, Miami or Maine. No university is too big, no college too small. We tell it all. INSiiGHTS Sports Talk with your hosts, the coach, Mickey Clayton and Clayton Smith. They're bringing you insight on all the latest stories from all the biggest names in collegiate sports. Join us for the next 60 minutes for INSiiGHTS Sports Talk. The sports talk show of a different kind.
Welcome. I'm your host, Mickey Clayton, the coach. And INSiiGHTS is your show. We look to give you something new every time you listen to us. Today, we're going to have an exclusive INSiiGHTS interview with Duer Sharpe, the personable and articulate commissioner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. He is going to allow us insights into the SWAC, including possible conference expansion. Can anyone say Big Blue? South Carolina head football coach Steve Spurrier has sounded a warning salvo pow to everyone about why the football powerhouses want to make their own music and dance to their own song. Those powerhouse conferences believe they make the money, so they should make the rules. As a commissioner of an FCS league, Duer Sharpe also blows the trumpet for the conferences that aren't living in the exclusive high-rent sky-rise apartments of the powerhouse Big Five conferences. You do want to stay through the whole show because you're going to be summoned to the coach's office in the 8th inning. And don't leave before the 9th inning because Warren Sapp, a man's man for sure. Woo, that's my guy. Anyone loving that barbecue like he does? Anywhere he tells me it's good barbecue ribs, I'm going to get me a bone or two. I got to go there, I'm just telling you. But wait till it's all over because Warren Sapp will throw that final pitch in today's show. The first inning of every show is going to deal with cleaning up comments and questions from you, the listeners. Then a quick pitch out on what's going on right now. If you have a comment or observation, hit us on Twitter or Facebook. 2 eyes in the middle, INSiiGHTS, INSiiGHTS. Today's show is hashtag David and Goliath. Well, here comes the first pitch. With me is my co-host Clayton Smith, and we're going to respond to a few questions from our listeners from last week's show, which was PEDs, good or bad. We had a listener who had a concern about creatine usage and if it's something that really helps, and if we could find out something about it for him. Well, we did. We went to Dr. Garrison Rowe from the Tallahassee Orthopedic Clinic in Tallahassee, Florida, and that's a little redundant because you wouldn't expect the Tallahassee Orthopedic Clinic to be located in Miami. Well, anyway, we talked to Dr. Rowe. We asked him about creatine. We asked him if it actually works. And then we asked him again if his son or child, who are athletes, was using creatine, what would his thought be about that?
Hey, Mickey, it's Dr. Rowe. So you had some questions about basically creatine. Question number one was, does it have an advantage to athletes? And the answer is yes, a lot of times it does. Creatine is a naturally occurring substance, and basically the advantage for athletes to take this substance is if they are in any way lacking of it, it is an extra supply that can be stored in the muscle, and it can be used to regenerate energy during athletic competition or event and training, such that if you have an athlete that's trying to do multiple repetitions of, say, a sprint or lifting a weight, if that muscle normally tires out and that muscle uses ATP molecules for its energy, then the P, which is basically a phosphate unit, is needed to re-energize that ATP muscle. Creatine is actually creatine phosphate, and it's in just its form, and thus you get an extra phosphate unit that can be used to re-energize the muscle. So you can train longer, you can run longer, you can do things in an athletic arena that give you a sort of advantage. Now, there are about, I don't know, anywhere from, we look at the studies, 60 to 70% of the athletes that could benefit from that. That means about 30 to 40% are fully maximized or don't respond to the exogenous creatine. The second question is, does it lead to more injuries? And the answer is we really don't know. There's a stress-strain curve that determines when a muscle tendon unit will fail or when it will exert so much stress that a ligament will fail. And that's really hard to measure. There's been no studies that have shown that there's increased injuries in athletes that use creatine. Probably the biggest risk is occasionally you can have people that ingest too much. It's excreted in the kidneys, and so you can overtax a kidney that is maybe not normal or working on the fine line between normal and abnormal. But it's pretty safe. It's not like steroids where you have this increased muscle mass and power that can overload muscle tendon units or ligaments and cause injury, and it doesn't usually have a problem in terms of being metabolized in the liver and actually causing liver damage long term. And I think the final question was, would I let my son or daughter use creatine if it was their choice to try to gain an athletic advantage? And the answer would be, it depends on their age, and it depends on whether or not I felt like they were in such stiff competition that that little bit of advantage would be worth taking a supplement. It's a fairly safe supplement. It's like, your teenage son trying to take extra protein to build a little muscle while he works out in the weight room. And so it's not that risky. It's not the ones you hear about with kids having cardiac arrest. There has been some report of muscle cramps, but with good hydration, that seems to not be a problem. And hydration is always the key issue most times in whether an athlete cramps or not. Couple that with electrolyte balance, and you can probably put the increased cramping due to creatine probably to rest. Some of this stuff is still being researched and worked out, but in any event, I think it's relatively safe. I probably would not let my kids just knee-jerk use it because it's a vogue in thing to do. But it's not as bad as if they came home and said they wanted to use a injectable, ingestible steroid, for sure.
There it is, straight from Dr. Rowe. Dr. Rowe really knows his stuff. He added a little personal touch to it, giving some insight on how he would handle it with his child. Dr. Rowe, thanks so much for giving us insight into creatine. PEDs continues to be hot. On last week's show, we talked about upcoming news on PEDs, and we weren't wrong. It's been blistering across the news media about PEDs. And we have some more information because so much is going on, suspensions, discussions. Clayton, do you want to elaborate about what's going on to our listeners?
Well, the stuff really hit the fan this week. Major League Baseball did suspend 13 guys. The most famous, of course, is Alex Rodriguez, who's with the Yankees. He's suspended for the rest of this season, which is about 52 games, I believe that's correct, and also the next season. However, he is appealing his suspension, so he will be able to play until this has been decided. So there's an outside...
I thought it was already decided.
No, it's already been decided, but if he appeals, if a player appeals, then they can play until the appeal is heard.
About how long does the appeal process last?
The appeal could end this week, or it could start in the winter. So we don't know.
Okay.
We don't, as of right now, as of this airing date, we don't know. But he played last night. He'll play today.
And where did they play last night?
They played in Chicago last night.
What was the fan reaction to him? I can imagine, but what was the fan reaction to him?
Well, he went 1 for 4. They were in Chicago, so he wasn't playing a home game.
Okay.
but there were a lot of boos coming out of the stands. But his teammates did show a lot of support for him.
Well, most of these people that have been suspended, most of these baseball players, Clayton, they're all connected with Biogenesis Center?
That's correct. They're all connected with Biogenesis drug case. They have all been listed on they found on a manifest that was connected with that particular center, and that's why they have been suspended.
Okay, are these all like I think I only heard a couple of them. I know Johnny Peralta because he was with the Indians one time, and we had a guy who's like leading the league in stolen bases. And so, are any of these named players?
Well, in all honesty, only 4 of them are really named players. The guy you mentioned, Cabrera, who's leading the league in stolen bases with the Padres. You got Nelson Cruz with the Rangers. Peralta, who you mentioned also, who's now with the Tigers. And, of course, A-Rod. A few of the other guys, they're in the minor leagues now. A couple of them have played a little bit, played sparingly. But those are the 4 top names out of the 13 that have been suspended, not including Braun.
Okay, but then we suspended one guy, but Major League Baseball suspends a guy, and if the team gets in the playoff, he can play. I'm not understanding how you get suspended, and then if your team does well and gets into the playoff, my bad, you can come back and finish up the season. That just seems like a little injustice to me.
Players Association. That's something they negotiated. That's something they're able to do.
Wow. Explain that a little bit more. Now, what do you mean?
Well, these guys have been suspended 50 games. So if they have 53 games left in the season, they start their suspension immediately. Then there's 3 games left in the regular season, whatever postseason is left, they're allowed to play.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to take a timeout. And we're going to come back and hear the interview from Duer Sharpe. Follow us on INSiiGHTS, INSiiGHTS on Twitter. And you can hit me on Twitter, Mickey Clayton FL on Twitter. Follow INSiiGHTS. We'll be right back.
1, 2, talk that talk.
I'm waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. I'm waking up.
Hello? What up, Dre? Hold up, I gotta finish something. Talk to me.
This is Mickey Clayton, and we're back on INSiiGHTS, and we're going to keep the pressure on. And right now, we're going to have an exclusive interview that we have with Duer Sharpe, the personable commissioner from the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And we're going to share that with you right now.
Tell me a little bit about the strengths of the SWAC, the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Tell me what you perceive as the strengths of your conference.
Well, I would have to say the strength really lies with the 10-member institutions and those student athletes and those coaches and administrators and the presidents and chancellors, but definitely with our fans. I mean, we probably have, I wouldn't say probably, we definitely have the most passionate fans in the country in the SWAC. So it's always good, man, when you go and you hear that you can see it, you can feel it, and the pageantry and the pride that they take in their institutions. Some people didn't even go to the school, but they just love the school so much because they grew up with it. It's kind of ingrained in them. So it's always, it's always a good time to go out and talk with folks who have that historical background of the institution and what it was like back when, Walter Payton played and what it was like when Jerry Rice played and Shaq Harris and Doug Williams. So I really enjoy having those conversations as I get out in SWAC country.
Okay. You mentioned something in the first part of that response. You said something about the students and academically. Tell us some of the advantages or disadvantages you may have with some of your student athletes at at the SWAC school. Tell us a little bit about that, about the academic challenges and the academic successes that you have with the kids who graduate from your institutions.
Well, I think really we struggle with the APR because it's a lot of it has to do with resources, not just financial resources, but faculty. We're going to have to do a better job of providing our student athletes with more folks who are employed at the university to assist them with making the right choices when it comes to, advising them on what classes to take and things of that nature and how close you are to graduating and here's how many degree credits you need and things of that nature. So I think the one good thing definitely is the individual attention that you get at a SWAC institution. It's not, I went to the University of Wisconsin. You walk into a lecture hall, it's one professor for 500 people. Right. Where you go to an HBCU, it's not going to be that. You're going to